Picture the Roman Emperor Claudius, right? He's sitting in the heart of the most powerful empire in the ancient world, and he is just completely captivated by this tiny, white, like 7-pound dog resting in his sleeve.
It's quite a mental image, honestly.
Right. Now, fast forward 2 millennia, and I want you to look over at the sofa in your living room. You probably have a very similar tiny dog staring right back at you, tracking your every single move.
Yeah, that stare is very familiar to a lot of people.
Definitely. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up a massive stack of sources. We've got veterinary behavioral journals, we have historical archives on ancient selective breeding, and clinical canine psychology notes.
It's a really fantastic collection of data.
It really is. And our mission today, we are taking a magnifying glass to the Maltese, but we're completely flipping the script on how people normally talk about these dogs.
Which is usually just out of pure frustration, right?
Exactly. Usually the conversation is this desperate internet search like, how do I stop my Maltese from barking? Or how do I stop my dog from following me everywhere?
Yeah, we've all been there.
Today, we are throwing those questions completely out the window. We are digging into the neurological and historical why. Like, why does this specific breed behave this way? Okay, let's unpack this. Because once you decode the ancient psychological blueprint operating inside that tiny skull, the daily frustrations just, well, they vanish. And the dog's behavior starts to make a startling amount of sense.
Yeah, and to understand that blueprint, we really have to strip away a lot of modern baggage. Like, when you open up the historical archives on the Maltese, you realize you are dealing with a biological anomaly.
An anomaly, how so?
Well, look at almost any other breed. Terriers were engineered to hunt vermin. Retrievers were genetically programmed to fetch waterfowl. Herding dogs were bred to control livestock.
Right, they all have these very physical outdoor jobs.
Exactly. But the Maltese has spent over 2,000 years with one singular, highly specialized job description, and that is to observe, accompany, and comfort human beings.
Wow, 2,000 years just for that.
Yeah, they are one of the oldest purebreds on the planet. And centuries of selective breeding didn't prioritize prey drive or bite force. It prioritized emotional intelligence and human attunement.
So they're literally built to read us.
Completely. And that deep genetic wiring doesn't just evaporate because the dog is now living in a modern apartment. It dictates their entire sensory experience of the world.
Which means we need to talk about how that highly attuned 2,000-year-old brain is actually processing information. Like when you ask it to sit, stay, or leave a shoe alone.
Like the day-to-day training stuff.
Yeah, because I want to tackle the cognitive capacity of toy breeds. Reading through these behavioral journals, there is this massive, incredibly unfair misconception out there.
Oh, absolutely.
People treat these dogs like they're physically too small to have complex thoughts, or that they simply don't require training because, well, they weigh less than a gallon of milk.
And that myth is honestly one of the most destructive forces in toy breed management. We really have to separate the concept of physical volume from neurological complexity.
So size literally doesn't matter here.
Not at all. A Maltese has the exact same intricate neurological machinery, the same capacity for problem solving, and the same memory retention as, say, a Belgian Malinois or a German Shepherd.
That's wild to think about.
It is. It comes down to their encephalization quotient. That's the ratio of brain size to body mass. It provides them with a remarkably high processing speed for learning household routines and interpreting human body language.
So they're taking it all in very quickly.
Yes. Because their historical blueprint was focused entirely on human partnership, they are fiercely motivated to engage in cooperative tasks.
I always try to visualize it like this. Assuming a Maltese can't learn complex commands is like assuming a modern smartphone has no processing power just because it fits in your pocket.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
The hardware is fully equipped and state-of-the-art. We just tend to treat these dogs like static accessories instead of interactive partners.
Right. The smartphone analogy highlights the core issue perfectly. The operating system is sophisticated, which means the input you provide has to be equally thoughtful.
Okay, so what does the data say about that input?
Well, when we look at the clinical data on canine learning theories, positive reinforcement isn't just a gentle preference for this breed. It is pretty much the only effective language they speak.
Why is that?
Because when you train a Maltese using positive markers, they aren't merely memorizing a mechanical action like putting their rear end on the floor for a sit. They are analyzing a complex web of social data.
So it's deeper than just the trick.
Way deeper. They map your tone of voice, your physical posture, your predictability, and the overall safety of the interaction. They're essentially learning the relationship itself.
Wait, I want to challenge the reverse of that, though. If they are so attuned to the relationship, what actually happens in their brain if an owner loses their temper?
That's a really important question.
Like, if I yell at a Maltese for having an accident on the rug, isn't that just standard discipline? Did they really process it that differently from a larger working breed?
The neurological response is drastically different, actually. In a breed engineered for intense human bonding, harsh verbal or physical corrections trigger an exaggerated stress response in their amygdala.
So they panic.
Exactly. A livestock guardian dog might brush off a loud shout because its genetics prioritize independent environmental scanning. But a Maltese's genetics prioritize you.
Right. You are their whole world.
So when the center of their universe suddenly becomes volatile and threatening, it causes a systemic crash in their ability to learn.
They just shut down.
They do. The dog stops trying to figure out what you want and shifts entirely into appeasement behavior.
Oh.
Cowering, lip-licking, freezing, just to turn off the threat.
So you aren't actually teaching them anything in that moment.
No, you haven't taught them a boundary at all. You've just damaged the core partnership they rely on to function.
Man, that explains the trap so many first-time owners fall into. They bring home this fluffy, beautiful animal expecting a passive lapdog.
Right. A living stuffed animal.
Exactly. A stuffed animal that occasionally needs a walk. But instead, they get this pocket-sized supercomputer that is desperate for structure, mental stimulation, and, clear communication.
And when a high-processing brain lacks a structured outlet, that cognitive energy inevitably metastasizes into anxiety or destructive behavior.
So they make up their own jobs.
They do. The dog attempts to invent its own jobs, which humans usually categorize as behavioral problems.
That leads directly to the most common label I saw in our research stack. If they are so smart and their brain is firing on all cylinders trying to map our relationship, why do they get labeled as stubborn?
Ah, yes, the stubborn label.
I hear this constantly from people. My Maltese is just stubborn.
What's fascinating here is that we project human morality onto canine behavior. We label a dog stubborn because we assume they hear a command, understand it perfectly, and are actively choosing defiance despite us.
Right, like they're a teenager rolling their eyes.
Exactly. But the behavioral science paints a completely different picture. What an owner perceives as stubbornness in a Maltese is almost always one of two things:
Which are?
extreme environmental distraction or a massive failure in the owner's reinforcement history.
Okay, let me push back on that owner's failure point.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that if my 7-pound dog decides to jump up on my legs while I'm cooking and refuses to get down when I say off, that's my fault for being lazy? Doesn't the dog bear some responsibility for ignoring the rule?
Consider the physics of the interaction first. Let's look at the mechanics of positive and negative feedback loops. If an 80-pound Doberman jumps on your chest when you walk through the door, you physically stumble backwards, right?
For sure. You're getting knocked over.
So you immediately push the dog away, turn your back, and withhold attention because your physical safety is compromised. The Doberman gets a clear, consistent boundary.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
When your 7-pound Maltese jumps on your shin, it registers as a mild flutter. There is no physical threat. In fact, most owners unconsciously look down, smile, and maybe even scoop the dog up.
Wow. I see the trap. Because there are no immediate negative physical consequences for the human, we don't enforce the boundary.
Exactly. The dog's brain operates purely on behavioral economics. Jumping up yielded the ultimate currency, which is your attention and physical contact. You have essentially paid the dog $1 million for jumping.
So we're training them to ignore the rules without realizing it.
Yes. 3 months later, when you have guests over and you suddenly want the dog to stay on the floor, you issue the off command. The dog isn't being stubborn by ignoring you.
The dog is playing the odds.
Precisely. Their data tells them that jumping pays out. The inconsistency in the human's behavior creates the illusion of stubbornness in the dog.
Okay, that covers the accidental rewards. But what about the distraction aspect? Say we are in the park, I have a treat, I call my dog, and they just stare at a tree.
Right, the blank stare.
Yeah. They aren't jumping on me, they just seem to be flat out ignoring my existence.
This goes back to their primary genetic directive, which is intense observation. A Maltese doesn't just passively exist in a space, they are actively running telemetry on it.
Telemetry? Like a radar?
Basically, yes. They are cataloging the scent of another dog that passed by an hour ago, the vibration of a truck 3 blocks away, and the subtle movement of a squirrel in the canopy.
So they aren't ignoring me, they're just busy.
Their sensory input is incredibly dense. When they freeze and appear to ignore your recall command, their processing bandwidth is simply maxed out by environmental data.
My job, then, isn't to get into a battle of wills or try to establish dominance. My job is to manipulate the environment so that I become a more engaging stimulus than the squirrel.
You have to win the battle for their attention, not the battle for their submission.
If we follow the thread of that hypervigilant observation, it brings us to the phenomenon that every single Maltese owner listening to this will recognize.
The Velcro dog.
Yes. The fact that I cannot walk from my kitchen to my bathroom without a tiny white shadow trailing an inch behind my heel.
It is arguably the defining trait of the breed.
But the clinical literature treats this so differently than the average owner does. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we tend to view this constant shadowing as a behavioral flaw.
We think they're broken.
Right. We think the dog is being overly clingy or insecure, or that we've somehow coddled them too much. But looking at the historical data, when your dog follows you into the bathroom, it is executing a survival imperative.
It really is.
For 2 millennia, a Maltese that wandered away from its human simply didn't survive. They were bred to be physically tethered to our presence.
And recognizing that shifts the entire emotional dynamic of living with them. You are fighting a 2,000-year-old genetic current if you expect a Maltese to be aloof or independent like a Chow Chow or an Afghan hound.
So we shouldn't take it personally or try to train it entirely out of them?
No, the proximity to the human is their baseline for physiological safety.
We still have to leave the house, though. Like, we have to go to work, we have to buy groceries, we can't actually carry them in our sleeves like a Roman emperor.
As much as they might want us to.
True. So how do we reconcile their genetic need for proximity with the realities of modern human schedules?
The solution requires holding two seemingly contradictory concepts in your mind simultaneously. The profound attachment they offer is the beauty of the breed. It is a feature, not a bug, and you shouldn't try to extinguish it.
Okay.
However, the capacity for healthy, temporary independence must be deliberately constructed by the owner.
To prevent separation anxiety, right?
Exactly, to prevent that natural attachment from curdling into clinical separation distress. You cannot expect a brain designed for constant companionship to intuitively understand the concept of being left alone.
Let's get into the mechanics of constructing that independence. If an owner is dealing with a dog that immediately begins pacing and panting the second the car keys jingle, what is the actual biological intervention?
The intervention relies on manipulating the dog's HPA axis. That's the system that regulates their stress hormones, like cortisol.
So right now, the sound of the keys means a cortisol spike.
Right. The sound of your keys triggers a massive spike because the dog anticipates abandonment. We have to rewire that trigger through systematic desensitization.
How do we do that?
You must break the departure down into microscopic, non-threatening components. You might pick up the keys and just sit on the couch. You might put your coat on and go wash the dishes.
Oh, I see. You are decoupling the trigger from the traumatic event.
Precisely.
You are basically boring them into feeling safe.
Exactly. You bore them. Eventually, you progress to stepping outside the front door for perhaps 5 seconds and returning.
I notice in the clinical notes that the way humans act during these departures is often the biggest catalyst for the dog's panic. People love to give these dramatic emotional goodbyes, like, "I'm so sorry, mommy has to go to work. Be a good boy, I'll miss you."
And that human behavior is completely toxic to a highly attuned dog. Remember, they are reading your facial expressions and tone. If you act like you are marching off to war, their amygdala registers that the environment is dangerous and unstable.
So we need to chill out.
Very much so. Your departures must be utterly devoid of emotion. No eye contact, no apologies, just slip out.
What about when we come back?
More importantly, your returns must be equally sterile. If you burst through the door and throw a high-pitched celebration, you are validating their belief that your absence was a terrifying ordeal that they barely survived.
What is a metric for success there, though? A lot of owners hear a whimper from behind the door and assume the desensitization is failing. How do we separate a dog that is just voicing a minor complaint from a dog that is experiencing a genuine biological panic?
The clinical distinction is found in the physical intensity and duration of the behavior. A dog adjusting to a new routine might whine for 5 minutes, pace near the door, and then eventually settle on a rug and go to sleep.
That sounds pretty normal.
It is. That is a normal stress response returning to baseline. But a dog experiencing clinical separation anxiety cannot self-regulate. You will see frantic, non-stop vocalization that lasts for hours. hypersalivation to the point where their chest is soaked, or destructive behavior directed at the exit points.
Like chewing the door frame.
Right, chewing door frames or tearing up carpet to escape. When a dog crosses that threshold, training alone is insufficient. You are dealing with a severe panic disorder that requires intervention from a veterinary behaviorist, usually to chemically lower the dog's panic threshold before any learning can occur.
Let's pivot from the vocalization they make when we leave to the vocalization they make when we are sitting right next to them.
The barking.
Yes. If their nervous system is wired to be hyper-attached and hyper-focused on us, what happens when that exact same hyper-vigilant machinery is pointed outward at the street? Does that biological link explain why they seem to bark at every single leaf blowing across the driveway?
The mechanism is identical. The focus has merely shifted. The historical job wasn't just to warm laps, it was also to serve as an early warning system for the household.
Oh, because they're too small to actually guard anything.
Right. They lack the physical mass to fight off an intruder. So their evolutionary defense mechanism is their voice. Barking at a noise in the hallway or a delivery driver on the porch is not a character flaw. It is a highly efficient, genetically programmed alarm system functioning exactly as intended.
They detect an anomaly and report it.
Exactly. They detect an environmental anomaly, and they're transferring that data to you loudly.
But there is a piece of advice floating around out there that drives me crazy. I hear people say, oh, he's just a vocal puppy. He'll eventually outgrow the barking phase once he gets used to the house.
Oh, yeah. Relying on a dog to organically outgrow a genetically ingrained behavior is a recipe for disaster.
Because it just gets worse.
In reality, the exact opposite happens, yes. Unchecked barking creates a self-reinforcing biological feedback loop. Let's trace the mail carrier scenario.
Okay, lay it out.
The truck pulls up. The dog perceives a potential threat and initiates the alarm bark. The mail carrier drops the package and drives away.
The dog thinks, my screaming just defeated a 2-ton metal beast.
Exactly. The dog experiences a massive rush of endorphins and dopamine. They successfully defended their territory. The behavior was powerfully rewarded by the environment. Every single day the mail carrier retreats, the neural pathway for barking grows thicker and more permanent.
If the behavior is self-reinforcing, and we already established that yelling at the dog damages the relationship, how do we physically stop the cycle? We can't just let them bark at the window for 10 years.
You cannot simply suppress an instinct. You must redirect the biological energy. The goal is to install a competing behavior.
Like what?
This requires proactive environmental management. If the triggers usually happen near the front window, you restrict access to the window during high traffic times. Then you teach an incompatible action.
How does that work in practice?
Say the doorbell rings. The dog's default response is to charge the door and vocalize. You use high-value reinforcement to train a new default. The doorbell rings, and the dog immediately sprints to a designated mat in the kitchen to receive a piece of chicken.
Oh, you are rewriting the software. Instead of doorbell equals stranger danger, it becomes doorbell equals kitchen snack.
Exactly. You are giving the dog a specific, rewarding job to perform when they feel that spike of alert energy. Furthermore, we really have to examine the dog's daily cognitive load.
You mean how bored they are?
Yes. A Maltese whose pocket supercomputer brain is bored, underexercised, and lacking in problem-solving activities will use barking as a recreational hobby. It is an incredibly stimulating activity for a dog with nothing else to do.
It's the equivalent of a bored human doom-scrolling on their phone, just generating cheap dopamine.
That's a great comparison. A tired, mentally fulfilled dog is significantly less likely to obsess over every sound in the hallway.
Which brings up a crucial point about the timeline of these dogs. We aren't just managing this energy for a few years. The veterinary journals highlight their extraordinary longevity.
Yeah, they live a very long time.
These dogs regularly live into their mid to late teens. Managing their brain is a 15-year commitment.
And the longevity of the breed shifts how we must approach socialization and cognitive maintenance.
We need to build a better metaphor for socialization than the usual ones. You always hear socialization is like a muscle, use it or lose it. But based on what we've discussed about their processing power, socialization for a Maltese feels more like updating the software on a smartphone.
How so?
Well, if you leave that phone in airplane mode, locked in your living room for 3 years, and then suddenly take it outside and try to connect it to a brand new Wi-Fi network, like a noisy street festival or a person wearing a bulky winter coat, the system is going to crash.
The software update metaphor captures the neurological reality perfectly. Habituation is an active, ongoing biological process.
So they don't just stay socialized automatically.
No, not at all. A Maltese that was confident and outgoing at 1 year old can easily develop severe neophobia, a fear of new things by age 7, if their world gradually shrinks to nothing but the living room and the backyard.
They need constant updates.
They require continuous positive exposure to novel sights, sounds, and surfaces throughout their entire adult life to maintain neural adaptability.
Let's talk about how that adaptability plays out with the rest of the household. We know they bond intensely with their primary owner, often making them excellent companions for older adults. But the data on family dynamics, specifically kids and other pets, requires some careful navigation
It does. The primary concern with children is structural, not behavioral.
because they're so small.
Right. The Maltese is generally quite affectionate, but their skeletal frame is remarkably delicate. A toddler tripping and falling onto a Labrador might result in a startled dog. A toddler falling onto a Maltese can result in a catastrophic fracture.
That's terrifying.
It is. Training in a family environment must be heavily directed at the children, teaching them to interact with the dog on the floor rather than carrying them, and respecting the dog's bodily autonomy.
What about other pets?
Regarding other animals, their lack of prey drive makes them peaceful cohabitants with cats. However, their size puts them in extreme peril around large, high-drive dogs,
Because they look like prey.
or just because of rough play. A friendly husky trying to initiate play can cause fatal internal injuries to a Maltese with a single paw strike. Complete segregation or intense supervision is non-negotiable.
Let's advance the timeline to the senior years because there's a fascinating section in the clinical notes about cognitive decline. We have to address the old saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That concept suggests that once a dog turns 10, their brain simply calcifies and learning stops.
The veterinary neurology data proves the concept is entirely backward. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, continues throughout the dog's entire lifespan.
So they can keep learning.
In fact, introducing new tasks in their senior years is critical for delaying canine cognitive dysfunction, which is essentially dog dementia.
But how do we actually stimulate a 15-year-old dog's brain if they have arthritis and can't go to, like, agility classes?
You shift the focus from physical exertion to olfactory processing.
Missing.
Exactly. Scent work is incredibly taxing on a dog's central nervous system. Taking a senior dog on a sniffari, a slow, meandering walk where the dog dictates the pace, and is allowed to spend 5 solid minutes analyzing the scent of a single fire hydrant, forces the hippocampus to process massive amounts of novel data.
And that builds cognitive reserve.
Yes, it builds cognitive reserve. Interactive puzzle toys that require them to manipulate levers to find food serve the exact same purpose.
But what if you are providing all of that cognitive support and the senior dog's behavior suddenly shifts anyway? The notes mention that a dog who has been flawlessly house-trained for a decade might suddenly start urinating on the rug, or a dog that used to love cuddling on the couch begins snapping when the owner tries to lift them.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the most critical diagnostic transition an owner must recognize. When an older dog's behavior radically changes, you are almost never looking at a psychological issue. You are looking at an unexpressed physiological crisis.
So sudden aggression is actually a diagnostic tool.
It is an SOS signal. Dogs are masters of masking chronic pain. If an older dog snaps when you reach for their chest, they aren't deciding to be cranky. They're desperately trying to protect a spine ravaged by osteoarthritis or a mouth suffering from severe dental disease.
Wow, so they're just hurting.
Yes. And if they suddenly seem stubborn and refuse to come when called, or if they start startling easily when you walk into the room, their sensory hardware is likely failing. Retinal degeneration or hearing loss makes the world terrifyingly unpredictable.
So they're defending themselves from what they can't see or hear.
They react with defensive anxiety because they can no longer accurately map their environment. Any sudden behavioral regression in a senior dog demands immediate veterinary diagnostics, not behavioral correction.
So what does this all mean for the person sitting on the couch right now looking at their Maltese? When we pull all of these threads together, the ancient Roman history, the hypervigilant processing power, the mechanical realities of their tiny size, and the complexities of their aging brain, a very clear picture emerges.
It really does.
The Maltese doesn't just learn a list of parlor tricks. It learns the rhythm of your household, the subtleties of your body language, and the emotional baseline of your relationship. When you stop fighting their genetic imperative to observe you and start managing the environment to support their brilliant, fragile minds, the daily frustrations evaporate.
The relationship shifts from a constant battle of behavioral management into a deeply rewarding cooperative partnership. You are no longer trying to fix a broken toy,
Mhm.
You are collaborating with a highly specialized companion.
And that brings me to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with today. Something to mull over the next time your dog is staring at you from across the room. We have established that this specific biological organism has been selectively refined for over 2,000 years with one overarching mission: to observe, mirror, and connect with human emotional states.
Right.
So, to what extent is your dog's daily behavior actually just a furry, four-legged mirror reflecting your own internal reality? Think about it. When they are frantically pacing the halls or completely unable to settle down during a busy evening, are they malfunctioning? Or are they accurately processing and reflecting the chaos and stress of your rushed mornings and anxious phone calls? If their entire genetic purpose is to run telemetry on you, maybe the most effective way to change your dog's mind is to first take a very hard look at the state of your own. You are the most important variable in their environment. Make sure you know what your stress levels are telling their ancient, hyper-observant brains.